watching the special edition of the Entrepreneurial SME, where we're celebrating women in business. My guests are Linda Omara-Koledade, founder and CEO of Mustard Seed, Makgosi Mabaso, managing executive of Telkom Consumer Broadband and Smarthome. Joining the discussion on Zoom is Irene Okoye, head of business and business growth and marketing at Redplan Business Consulting. Now, folks, money, right? I'm going to tell you stories of two guests I've hosted here. One is Daisy Muleko, who runs a business, a rabbitry business, right? It's called MP Biz Rabbitry. Amazing business that it is. Business from her own pocket. It's growing it very slowly. But she needs some money to get to a particular point. She has mentioned that if I got this, I would grow it 4 times, 10 times, right? And she has no access to that money. She therefore also battles to grow her markets because she doesn't have this money. That's one. Then there's a young woman who runs a mobile wellness spa, right? Christel Fredericks. Christel, amazing, quit a job during COVID, got into this business, doing amazing stuff. It's a mobile business. She goes to executives and does amazing, and she's trained in what she does. But to get to the next level, she won't do it from the boot of her car, right? And therefore it comes to this question. Why are we still having a conversation of funding in 2023, which I know I heard in 1998? Linda.
So I'll start and say, when it comes to access to funding, the first important point for entrepreneurs is to understand what type of funding is suitable for your business. I mean, there's a whole broad spectrum of funding, and that's part of the work that we do at Mustard Seed. There's angel investors, there's venture capital, there's private equity, there's your banks, there's your DFIs. So I think that's the first starting point, and that needs education. And then secondly, once you approach the funders, one has to be investor ready. And there's a whole lot of work that an entrepreneur needs to do to put your house in order so that once you pitch your business or once you apply for funding, you can be taken seriously. So those are the two high-level challenges that I'll highlight that limit or inhibit entrepreneurs from accessing funding.
Irene, do we have the appetite? And I hear you, and I hear you, and I understand, and I agree partly. But I seem to feel, Irene, that the funders in this country do not have appetite to fund entrepreneurs. They're too careful about funding entrepreneurs, including DFIs, who are using my money, who I wish they could risk it more to improve people like Christel and Daisy.
So I'd like to say that there is and there isn't. So one thing that's quite important for anyone that's building a business is the risk for failure is high, right? If we're going to be quite honest, is you might fail or even start a couple of businesses before you actually find the one or find the magic or the product market fit. And something that you require is patient capital, which is what most funders are not interested in, right? You need capital, that you need a funder who's going to say, okay, so in the first year, if you're not able to make X amount in terms of revenue that you promised, I'm okay with that. I'm able to make a concession there. And I feel like that's something that even in Africa, just speaking broadly, that a lot of funders are not really ready to risk, put their money in patient capital. So I would say that we're not quite there. And if there is funding that's available, I think we can use the scenario of 2019 when we had the lockdowns, where there was, banks were offering some funding. There was some government, certain government concessions that they made in order to help SMEs. But some of the disqualifying criteria were actually the fact that most people were not compliance ready, they were not investor ready, as Linda mentioned. So those are some of the complexities. And although the funding might be available, that's why I said the yes, there's also a lot of hoops that have to be skipped. And most entrepreneurs will just look at that and be like, no ways. I've been in forums where entrepreneurs say, okay, I understand the funding is there, but the red tape around it is so difficult that I would rather just continue bootstrapping my business. So where we are is we have a bunch of survivalist businesses, not because they don't want to grow, but because the funding that's available is too strict and stringent, which is not a bad thing, but is it making it, is it creating an enabling environment for entrepreneurs to actually access it? And then the second thing is the availability of patient capital, which I do not see. I haven't seen a lot of that. And that's why we need to be at least a little creative, like Linda mentioned, in terms of the different funding opportunities we explore.
Makgosi, I could imagine some of my friends who are in the finance space saying easier said than done, Rams. You know, and some of these guys that you're talking to, they're fishing in a small pond where everybody's playing. It's not easy to fund them because we don't know if they'll succeed. Through technology, how do we help people like Crystal to start fishing in markets where it's much easier to get without having to leave home and without playing in a small pond all the time?
Yeah, so I think, and therein I think lies the opportunity, Rams, because, I mean, the likes of even the examples that you just put on the table, I just think that there isn't enough visibility for these entrepreneurs, whereby you have a platform of funders, right, whom at any given point in time, and that becomes a marketplace, let's say, right? Possible marketplace where various funders, private equity, the angel, you know, all these, the various frameworks that Linda was talking to can be part of this marketplace. Because it is that platform whereby those entrepreneurs then have the opportunity to then identify typical investors that are willing to invest in their businesses, for example, because not all investors would want to invest in those businesses. Some will be keen to look at technology because that makes sense for them. Some will be keen to look at the mobile wellness, you know, example that you gave. Yeah. So I think technology can probably play a very key role, I think, in that as a marketplace. I've never seen it. If it is there, then that means that maybe there's an opportunity to create something similar, you know, in the South African borders, which can still be accessed, of course, by some of the global funders out there.
Can I just add on top of what you're saying and what Irene was saying? I also feel like when it comes to capital, the majority of capital in the South African economy is focused on the corporate type of structure, right? We do not have a significant pool of capital within venture, and that's the patient capital that Irene was talking about. We do not have a lot of wealthy people stepping out and becoming angel investors. And in the first world, that patient capital that's taking equity, taking a risk before you've even put your product in the market is so important to nurture the entrepreneurship culture and assist entrepreneurs. So the majority of entrepreneurs are approaching your traditional banks, DFIs as you mentioned, and unfortunately, they don't necessarily have the appetite, the skills and the know-how to invest at that early stage. So I think a lot of work also needs to be done to bolster. I'm told there's a bit of
patient capital in Stellenbosch, though. I mean, I'm told that's what the way the angel funders are found, and they're doing amazing work with SMEs. But I know it's a very, I keep on giving you the unfair questions, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. The examples I made of Daisy and Christelle, right? I mean, you don't know them. You probably did not even see the shows that I did with them. And it's unfair for you to answer the question I'm going to ask, but I'm still going to ask it. If you were to venture in some advice to them about how to take their businesses to the next level, and maybe to keep it sustained for a while, what would you say to those small kind of businesses?
I would definitely, to Makhosi's point, say networking is important. That's a core focus of what we do at Mustard Seed, is to create a platform to network, because you never know where you'll meet a strategic partnership, you know, that will enable your business, you know. So I'd say networking is very important. I would say finding mentors who have run the race that they're trying to run before them, because you can get a lot of tips and a lot of guidance, and again, a lot of connections through that. And then I would say definitely look into an investor readiness program. There are a few programs out there specifically for women, and there's one that has been launched recently through the IDC, where you can actually learn how to position yourself to access funding.
And it's accessible.
It's accessible.
Some of the stories I hear about the DFIs tell me something different, but please don't answer that. That's just me ranting. Irene, what we saw, and you mentioned COVID, what we saw 2020, 2021 was a horrible period, right? A lot of businesses went under. Is there a way businesses can build themselves to be disaster-proof? as much as possible. I'm sure there is no complete disaster-proofness, but is there a way that some of us can start a business and focus that should a COVID happen again in 3 years, I should be okay?
I think that's a good question. And just to double tap on what we spoke about when we spoke about the technology that we have, we are now living in an age where we have access to as much information as you can imagine. The challenge here is how we distill it. So what we learned from COVID is we can pivot. And now we can use technology to somewhat get an indication of what do I need to mechanize now? What do I need to think about in the next 2 years, 3 years? So the scenario planning that each business person needs to do. Should a crisis happen, can I pivot my business to an online offering? Can I do X, Y, Z? So I feel like technology is quite important when it comes to the innovative nature of building a resilient business, a business that can withstand the challenges of the economy, the up and down of the ratings. I really believe that it's about using the information that we have at the moment, doing scenarios and painting a couple of scenarios for your business and looking at worst case. I always say, even with budgeting, always do a worst case scenario. What's your plan? Should you not be able to make revenue X, which is what you anticipated? Are you able to still sustain operations? So I think it's a use of technology, being as innovative as possible, and streamlining what you can streamline now. When everything is okay, streamline as much as you can. Acquire that knowledge. And just, Rams, if you may allow me to just double tap on what Linda spoke about in terms of networking and social capital. Some of the studies that I did during, my past, environments where I've worked in, is we did studies around why women are not taking these opportunities to network. And one of the things that came out from the studies that we did was the fact that the networking sessions do not necessarily align with the responsibilities and the roles that women play. So it's about creating also environments, those networking opportunities or social capital opportunities in such a way that they're able to help women. So whether it's even having sessions in the evenings, if you're doing a workshop or whatever it is, trying to align to a woman's schedule, because most women are picking up their children, they're doing so many things, they're very multifaceted. So as much as we say that, networking and mentorship and capacity building is important, I think it's also important to look at a gender lens to everything that we do, whether it's funding, whether it's workshops, whether it's, capacity building as a whole. Each and every area we need to look at gender lens. We need to apply a gender lens to it.
Makgosi, in that space, I think Irene mentioned the word technology at least 3 times, right? Now, the WEF, World Economic Forum, says that women make up 58% of Africa's self-employed people, right? And this is contributing 13% to Africa's GDP. We clearly know now that there are structural impediments to getting this to grow, to making them more successful. Could then technology be the answer? Because we're not going to succumb some of these structural impediments tomorrow.
Yeah, Rams, thanks for the question. So that's actually the role of technology, right? It's really meant to break the boundaries. That's its core purpose, if you look at it. So I have no doubt that that's what technology is meant to do, right? And I think, Beck, you also asked me another question from a technology perspective. Remember, with technology, the beauty about it is not only are you going to end up having access to your local markets, for example, you will have, with technology and being part of a marketplace, for example, you have an opportunity to have access to a much wide range, of markets out there. So it is meant to do that. It's meant to solve funding issues that we talk to. It's meant to solve networking issues that we talk to. It's meant to solve, the issues that talks to training and education. I think there's a place for it to play in the core aspects of what entrepreneurs are actually struggling with. I think the biggest one would be, how then do you position technology in a way that it is easily adaptable? Let me put it like that, because there's also an issue around You can put a lot of technology on the table, but if we are not able to understand it and absorb it, we have a problem. It will just end up being a technology for the sake of technology. So somehow it must really be able to solve for those problems one way or the other. And I think in the developed markets, that's exactly what it does. It really plays a very key role in ensuring that it reduces some of those challenges that we were talking to earlier.
Linda, you're probably going to remember me very badly after today because I keep on saving these questions for you. It's just a coincidence, trust me. If you look at the schools that your children go to, right? There are benefactors who are ex-students of those schools, and the old people, they were there and they keep on giving to these schools. Even universities, if you go to any big university, you find that most of the funding comes from people who studied there in 1904, and they fund research and stuff like that. Is that what is missing among us? I feel like there is no core of us who've made it and are coming back to create a pot for others to grow further from where they came.
Yes, I think it is part, definitely, I think it is part of the missing piece in the puzzle. I mean, if we look back in terms of the different financing options I mentioned, an angel investor is someone who's done incredibly well in his business, but now is willing to plow back capital with up-and-coming entrepreneurs. We don't have a thriving ecosystem of angel investors on the continent, in South Africa specifically. Then there's also the concept of family office. That is a new concept relatively in our continent, whereas in the first world, the concept of a family that's doing incredibly well, pulling their funds together, organizing themselves and reinvesting, like you're saying, in universities. We're not that organized. We're still at the stage where we're trying to get a will. We're still battling with our elderly people, making sure they have a will so that the wealth can be transferred to the next generation. So definitely, I do think perhaps this generation will hopefully do better to get a lot more organized once they've been successful as an entrepreneur, to plow back. It is a critical aspect and a missing element, I would say, in terms of the funding spectrum.
I'm going to ask all three of you one final question, and I want answers from the three of you. And I start with you, Irene. If we had to meet again, the four of us here, say in 2 years' time, would the world of women entrepreneurship look better than it looks today? And why do you think so?
Yeah, I'm absolutely optimistic that it will look better. There's a study that you quoted by MasterCard, which also shows that there's been growth, significant growth in terms of the number of women that are taking up entrepreneurship. There's a lot of organizations that are going back to the roots, schools, universities to talk about entrepreneurship, and also the involvement of women. Women are in a better place to articulate who they are, their value. We all know about imposter syndrome. We're all dealing with those issues that stop us from being able to convey who we are and our value. So I believe, I'm very optimistic that things will be different 2 years from now.
Makgosi.
Yeah, so I also think that it will be different. It's a momentum. We've already started. It looks good every year. It looks good every day, right? So I have no doubt that it will look better. But it's also because we're starting to know more, right? The more we know, the more we're going to be able to do better. And we know more through these conversations. We know more because we're starting to have a lot more women networks. We know more because even the media is also...
Technology.
Yeah, it's also because of technology. And also the media is doing a very good job in really ensuring that some of this information is becoming available. I have no doubt we have conversations with our daughters and our sons, right, about the fact that there's probably not enough employment for you, as time goes on. Think about how you're actually going to create business for yourselves. We will do no. I have
Linda?
no doubt.
Sorry. So I agree. And adding on to Makgosi, I feel like if I look at my organization, Mustard Seed, like I said, we focus on investing, entrepreneurship, leadership. Those aren't traditional topics that women would naturally perhaps gravitate towards in our society. But interestingly enough, over 60, almost 70% of our participants are female. And in terms of networking as well, in terms of those that show up, over sometimes 70, 80% are female. So women are hungry. They want to learn. They want to be empowered. So I think that's a great progress in our stride. And as well, I mean, we're hosting an upcoming Women's Day event. We're showcasing incredible role models. So the more role models are out there, like you were saying, the more female entrepreneurs that are doing incredible things, the more it inspires. So I think it's like it's a snowball effect. It's picking up momentum. we see it. We see incredible female-led businesses out there. So I definitely think in 4 years' time, the landscape will look differently for female entrepreneurs.
Linda, Makgosi, Irene, thank you so much to all three of you. No doubt there is still a long way to go, but as today's conversation has shown, we are well on our way to creating and recognizing sisters who are doing it for themselves in the world of business. Thank you for watching the Entrepreneurial SME. From me, Mabote. Good night and God bless.
Telkom Business, behind South African businesses' drive to thrive.